Hi, everybody. Nitin Sarin and Vinamra Longani in India from Sarin Company. Today is October the 5th, and we're doing our once a month update on the Indian market. Gentlemen, I hope you're well.
Very well. Thank you very much. How are you? I hope you're well too.
Well, I'm trying to hope that I don't have COVID.
Oh, I'm sure you'll be fine.
I'm hoping. I had to have a test yesterday. Anyway, so never mind me, as they say. Let's talk about the Indian market, gentlemen. Recovering the domestic Indian market. We've seen China starting to recover really well, but India, you had a spike in COVID. How's that playing out? Any recovery? Any signals for recovery?
Yeah, I mean, Nitin, is it okay if I take the lead on that one?
Please, it's all yours.
Okay. So, I mean, we did have a spike where we were about to touch 100,000 COVID cases a day. I mean, before that scares anybody, we're a large country of 1.3 billion people, and we've massively increased testing. So, I mean, I guess with increased testing come these scary statistics that we've got so many positive people. So, though one must add that we didn't reach or breach that 100,000 COVID positive cases a day threshold, and I mean we're back down to about 70,000 a day, which is great. That means to say that goes to show that we're doing something right. But turning our attention to the recovery of the aviation market, I mean we just came out of a long weekend where we had the 2nd of October was Gandhi Jayanti. It was the birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. And then obviously the Saturday and Sunday, which followed. So we breached the 150,000 passenger mark over the weekend of people traveling in a day, which is great, which is a significant milestone. I mean, to put that in perspective, pre-COVID, we had between 350 or 375,000 passengers traveling a day. So we're still far, far away from pre-COVID levels, but we're we're doing reasonably okay. At least we're getting there. And as of yesterday, we had 168,000 passengers take to the skies in India within the country. So there is an improvement from last time. And part of the improvement is because a lot of states within the country have eased their quarantine restrictions. So apart from India imposing a 14-day quarantine on anybody who's flying into the country from abroad, various states had imposed some really ridiculous quarantine restrictions for people traveling even within the country, even though we are just one big country. So a lot of those have been eased over a period of time, especially for business travelers. So for example, I could go and see Nitin and finally visit the headquarters of our firm after 6 months or whatever. And I could fly in, and it was a day trip. So I flew in the morning and flew back in the evening. And I could do that now, but a couple of weeks ago I couldn't, because if I was to go to Chandigarh, I would have to stay there for 14 days, which was bizarre. And I don't think anybody in Chandigarh, including Nitin, would have me for 14 days.
Finally, on that point, I still have to take my first flight. I haven't flown since January now. So,
I took a flight 2 weeks ago. It was my first flight in 221 days. Yes, I counted the days. And it was fantastic.
Yeah.
That sensation of takeoff, it was just like, yes, this is what I was meant to be doing. So
I'm certain that I'll probably shed a few tears when that happens. I'll be so ecstatic.
What was interesting for me is that, you know, all the crew in the US are subject, as you can imagine, that the payroll support is gone. And, you know, there's talk up to 45,000 people losing their jobs in the industry, which is catastrophic. It is a number that is staggering, and well, it's just too awful to really consider. And in the midst of all this madness that these people are working in, I have to say that it was noticeable how professional, polite, calm these people were. You know, they were looking at maybe at the end of the month, there was going to be no paycheck. And
Yep.
professional, polite, well, really, it was a testimony to the kind of people that work in this industry. That's just a totally a side issue, not to do with India, but just my own
No,
experience.
I just to add to that, Addison, it's, I keep thinking all the time about pilots, and when you think of pilots, as a separate entity from the whole aviation aspect, they come across as a very different breed of people. But when they're actually, in the cockpit flying you around, you forget that these guys are not being paid their full salaries, or they're not being paid salaries at all. And that's when you realize that these are real dedicated bunch of people, and it's tough for them. They are the first line of defense, or the first line of safety for any aircraft, and they are doing their jobs, and probably getting the worst deal.
The thing that worries me, and I don't know what's happening in the Indian airline industry, and that might be an interesting thing for us to spend a moment to talk about. If you're an airline pilot, what other job can you really do?
Yeah, not very many.
You're not going to be a bus driver.
Well, I don't think I think you'd probably get killed if you were to suggest that to an airline pilot.
I'm just saying it's a niche skill.
It's true. Yeah.
And outside of that niche, what do you have?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you'd be surprised. I wrote about this in one of my articles, and this is available on our website on the Insight section. In India, you could literally finish school and you could go learn flying and you could become a pilot. I mean, no offense, but you could really be at the age of 18, you can go to flying school and you can become a pilot. So what that does is, you don't have a university degree, you don't have a college degree. So in circumstances like these, when the industry is sort of collapsing in front of our eyes, and a recovery, I mean, till the time a vaccine doesn't come, we really don't know when travel is going to sort of return to the way it was. What are pilots supposed to do? Because like you said, what they do is so niche that they don't really have the skill sets to work in an office setup or go and do something else. So it is extremely challenging for them.
It's like sports persons, once you're done with the height of your career, then you find yourself in you're barely in your mid 30s and you're retired, and very few people have a backup after that.
True.
Quite depressing.
True. Yeah. But coming back to, I mean, like my flying experience, I don't know, I don't think it's the same in the US, but in India, all crews have got to be in full PPE. They've got to obviously wear a mask. All passengers and crew wear a face shield, and you're supposed to keep it on throughout the flight. You are literally given that at the gate area, and you can only take it off once you get off the plane. So, I mean, it was really strange getting back on a plane, especially with that face shield, because, I mean, as av geeks, you want to look outside of the window, you want to see what's happening outside. And the shield on my flight up, I'm not going to name the airline, was dirty and it was really poor quality. Fortunately, the one on the way back was much nicer,
right,
where I could see what was happening outside. So I was happy about that. But yeah, I mean, the recoveries, we're sort of adding, there's more people taking to the skies in India, which is a good thing. But will this momentum continue is something that we'll just have to wait and watch. I mean, we're getting into the holiday season, just like everywhere else in the world, but more so in India, because you've got Diwali coming up, which is like the largest Hindu holiday of the year. So, which is in early November. So there is usually the run up to Diwali. This is possibly the busiest time, the busiest quarter for the Indian aviation industry, which is when they make most of their money. So one would really hope that, they can sort of, I mean, I don't really know how much money they'd make, but they can sort of have as many planes and crews up in the air so that they have some sort of reserves for the winter.
Yep.
India's attempt at creating a local aircraft leasing system. Gentlemen, that's very interesting. What's going on there?
Well, in the middle of all of this COVID madness, there's the government of India is trying very hard to set up aircraft financing and leasing infrastructure within the country. So the main model has been based around what China is doing, where they have a lot of their aircraft financing and leasing is happening within China. So a couple of years ago, there was a big study which was carried out after all the stakeholders were consulted to find out why aircraft are not being financed from money that's available within the country. The starting point for all of this was the setting up of this city called Gift City. So it's the Gujarat International Finance Tech City in our state of Gujarat, which is essentially an IFSC, a zone where you can do business for financial services, and you have a lower tax structure, and you have lots of benefits. So it was planned around this Gift City, and the study was carried out, and all the the roadblocks as to why people are not financing from Indian banks and Indian companies, they were trying to figure out why. It turns out that when you do a comparison between a financing structure between India and Ireland, for example, where the money is coming through an Irish entity, vis-a-vis an Indian entity, there was a 48% difference in tax. So people, if you were trying to set that up, no one is going to pay 50% more, just to finance through an Indian entity. So that project, I would highly recommend people take a look at it. It's called the Rupee Raftar project. It's in the form of a brochure which the government came out with, and it's on that basis that the Ministry of Civil Aviation is trying very hard to get things set. So a couple of we're making very, very small bits of progress all the time, but I'm sure it's going to result in some the fruits of the labor can only be sweet. We've had small changes in the Gift City where they've removed stamp duty on transactions which are related to aircraft financing. We've had there's a certain period of time, 10 years or so, where there's a reduced level of tax or no tax at all. I'm not going into the specifics because it depends on what sort of company you are. So there are a whole bunch of steps that are being taken. And I must say the ministry has taken a very, very proactive role in pushing this along. And we have been working with the ministry very closely, purely on a pro bono level, because we have the expertise and the insight. So we've been telling them that these are the roadblocks you're going to have. Please amend these laws. These are the tax issues. These are the withholding tax issues, customs duty. There's a whole bunch of stuff that comes in the way. But we are trying very, very hard to get something going. Whether it'll actually happen or not in a successful way, that's anyone's guess. But the biggest hurdle at the moment is financing aircraft through the Indian rupee. When people are purchasing aircraft in USD, I don't think aircraft manufacturers are going to be very happy if someone comes along and says, I want to pay you in the Indian rupee and not in the dollar. So let's see how that pans out.
How many airplanes does the Indian market represent? Potentially, if this, pardon me, takes off, how big is this? How big is this? I mean, like China, we have an idea. What is the Indian situation?
It really depends. Vin will probably be able to give you a forecast of how many aircraft we're expecting in the country. But really depends. I mean, if they get rid of all the taxes and things, I'm sure there will be upwards of 1,000 and a half new aircraft which could be financed. It's all hypothetical at the moment, but the possibility is there.
Yeah, I mean, just to put it in perspective, we have, pre-COVID, we had about 950 odd aircraft registered on the Indian register. And 80% plus of these were on leases from foreign lessors. These leases obviously are in US dollar. So the Indian rupee has lost a considerable amount of value compared to the US dollar over the past couple of quarters. I mean, every time, the Indian rupee depreciates, the cost of operation for Indian Airlines goes up considerably. and they obviously are not being able to offset this with revenues, with incremental revenue coming in from the operations, considering India as such, such a market where we offer some of the world's cheapest fares and the lowest yields. So, I mean, so apart from the leasing costs, which are in US dollars, the airlines even pay for the fuel in US dollars. So, if we can manage to put a leasing system in place where aircraft might be bought in US dollars, for example, but at least leased locally from India in Indian rupees. So that at least, this impact of the exchange rate fluctuation does not impact Indian Airlines. So it's a huge step. And like Nitin said, we're working very closely with the ministry on this, obviously all on pro bono basis, because we're just so extremely passionate about trying to make a positive change, like contribute to a positive change as far as the industry is concerned.
So that's an interesting idea then. Who is going to be the entity that takes the forex risk?
I was just going to raise that actually, because in what Vin just said, there's going to be someone who's going to take that risk, because at the end of the day, it is going to be a US dollar purchase and the amounts are so high. So someone's going to be financing in US dollars. And if the lease rentals are in Indian rupees, then that sort of, no one would agree to that. But those are the challenges we have. Those are exactly the challenges that we have. So.
It's not like the central bank might step in and take on this role.
I'm not sure. You see, the thing is, as I said, recently, that the whole focus in India is slightly different. Any amount of money that we get is channelized into very different areas of progress for the rural areas. So it's a big pressure for these guys, to justify putting money into any sort of aviation vis-a-vis enriching someone's life. It's just a very difficult argument to have. Mm-hmm. And we have, as I said, there's about 70% of 1.3 billion people who are below $100 or $150 a month. So those are staggering numbers. So even giving $1 billion away, or even just setting that amount to any risk, it just doesn't fly.
Right.
Yeah. No, and just to add to that, imagine with this whole sort of ecosystem that the government is trying to set up, this 48% difference in cost is essentially revenue that goes to the government, right? Now, for the government, imagine the conundrum that the government faces, or the Ministry of Civil Aviation, more for that matter. If they were to approach the Ministry of Finance and say, listen, we want to set up this ecosystem, our airlines really will benefit, and this is going to be great for the aviation industry. So can you please waive off X amount of revenue that comes into you from X, Y, and Z? Now, the Ministry of Finance will be like, well, if I was to waive this revenue, can you show me revenue that will come in from somewhere else to sort of make up for it? Because I have 1.3 billion people, majority of whom sort of depend on agriculture and sort of subsidies and all sorts of subsidies and grants that we've got to take care of. So that is where, anybody in the West needs to really look at this initiative and everything that we've achieved in India, as far as even aviation is concerned, to look at it from a perspective that we're a country where only 1% of the people actually pay income tax. Can you imagine that? And the 1% of the people who pay income tax are the ones who are sort of taking care of 99% of the people in this country. And despite all of that, we've achieved what we have. So, I mean, this is, I guess, the whole idea of us setting this up, so that at least people in the West maybe find more context or perspective as to, the challenges that we have in India, and despite that, what we've achieved.
And Addison, I don't know whether you want to change the topic now or whether I should, dwell on this a little longer. Just to give you a small idea. So when we sit with the ministry, for example, we list out all the laws that are a roadblock or maybe an issue, and you'll be surprised. But each act of parliament would be dealt with by a different ministry. So we have this poor Ministry of Civil Aviation, who is trying to deal with the Ministry of Finance for a certain aspect, with the Ministry of Commerce and Industries with another aspect, with so it's just a Herculean task to get everything lined up so that you can have one in broad industry like aviation prosper. So it's just kudos to the ministry for doing that, and I say that very genuinely. I'm not saying that publicly because I work with them so closely, but they are a good bunch of people, and they work hard.
I'm just wondering how the Chinese were able to pull this off. Is it maybe an entirely different economic structure in China that allowed them to pull this off? It's interesting. That's not necessarily for something.
Yeah, that's a good question, though. That's a good question, and it has been studied closely. But then I personally haven't, delved very deep into that.
Well, I mean, I guess the only thing I'd possibly add there is like we're a democracy. So, and China, well, when China wants things done, things get done. So, there is no opposition. Whatever's proposed is sort of cleared. There is no due deliberation. Whatever the Communist Party says goes. We're a democracy. Tomorrow, if the government wants to implement something, people actually have the right to sort of voice their opinion and
Right.
and then take the matter to court, and that happens often. And I mean, just because we're a democracy and people have the freedom to be able to express their point of view, and that sometimes is an impediment. Sometimes, not all the time. I do value my freedom of speech and the fact, and I'm very proud of the fact that we are the world's largest democracy. But that sometimes is an impediment to growth.
Okay. I've got another thing to bring up here with you, gentlemen. Resumption of international air travel and the air bubble arrangements. What news do we have this month? Any changes from last month? Any improvements?
Well, I think India now has air bubble arrangements with about 16 countries. So, which includes countries like the United States, France, Germany, the UAE, Qatar, and multiple other nations, including nations like Japan. So we've got, but irrespective of these air bubble arrangements, the quarantine requirements remain. We've made some progress on, so the Indian quarantine is split into a 7-day institutional quarantine and a 7-day home quarantine. However, with at least at Delhi and Mumbai now, you can sort of arrive and get an RT-PCR test done. And if you're COVID negative, you can go home and quarantine at home for 14 days. You could also get the test done abroad before traveling and seek an exemption. And this is all automated. And I guess we spoke about this last time. So all of that's sort of in place now. But the real issue with these air bubbles is airlines have largely been restricted to carrying origin and destination traffic. And India has done that just to make sure that airlines, well, it might be called a protectionist measure, but what that does is, for example, only US-based carriers, United, Delta is not carrying any passengers to India, even though they operate cargo flights to India as of date. But only United can operate flights to India and carry passengers to and from India. Similarly, from the Indian side, Air India can do it. The European carriers can't really carry any Indian passengers from India onwards via their hubs into the US. So similarly, the Gulf carriers who carry a vast majority of traffic from India, on Sixth Freedom flights, that has completely been curtailed. So the Gulf nations, even though we have air bubble arrangements with them, these are only for origin and destination traffic.
All the freedoms are gone.
For the time being, yes, exactly.
That's fascinating. That's really interesting.
Exactly. So, just last week, the Indian government, so what the government does is they approve flights for a set period of time for foreign airlines from these various countries. So Lufthansa, for example, wanted approval for 40 odd flights a week into India from Germany. And they have a sizable presence in India. They operate from Munich, from Frankfurt, all over the country. They're a much loved airline too. So they wanted approvals for 40 odd flights a week. And the Indian government went back and said, listen, Germany has put India on this list where Indians can't really travel into Germany unless and until it's an emergency, or or you really have to. And for that you have to seek approval. So what this does is it puts Indian carriers, well, Air India for the time being, because they're the only ones who operate to Frankfurt, at a considerable disadvantage, because Indian carriers who do not have interline or feed into the European Union from Frankfurt onwards, I mean, they can interline, but interline fares obviously are a lot more compared to, I mean, a fare from on Lufthansa from Delhi, for example, to somewhere in the European Union via Frankfurt. So Air India is at a considerable disadvantage. So the Indian government said, well, we're only going to give you 7 frequencies a week instead of the 40 that you want. So until Germany changes this rule and it lets Indians sort of arrive and depart, arrive. So, and there was a diplomatic row, and it wasn't very pleasant, and Lufthansa has had to pull all their flights for most part of this month from India. So they're not operating to India. And now Germany's gone ahead and, well, restricted Air India from operating to Germany. So we're in this new world where air service agreements as they were have been suspended, and, you know, these bubbles have taken over where, to an extent, well, at least countries sort of, well, India in this case, exercise control and protectionist measure, where which is common the world over. Everyone's going local because you want to protect your jobs. You want to make sure your airlines sort of get whatever little assistance that they can. So it's extremely interesting. I'm sure Nitin has something to add.
Wow.
No, I'm annoyed from a practical perspective that, number one, we can't travel anywhere, and number two, I think all Indians are going to be put on lists for various countries around the world, purely because we are going to be number one, you know, with the number of COVID cases that we are going to have. So it's just, I mean, I don't enjoy it. Everything that I've learned or been trained for in law school, after law school, everything that I've practiced has been thrown out of the window. And it's like everyone's starting from scratch, which it doesn't fly with me. I don't appreciate this this whole bubble arrangement, because it just has so much uncertainty. And you know, if you're going to be deciding on a month to month basis, it's just chaotic. It's completely chaotic. That's, unfortunately, sometimes you have negative outcomes and negative views. This is one of the aspects which I'm, you know, completely, you know, I do not approve this bubble arrangement system.
Fascinating.
Yeah, but then in sharp contrast to what Nitin said, I mean, I sort of feel, you know, the air bubble arrangements give India, for that matter, in this case, as we're talking about India, some sort of control where you approve flights for a certain period of time. Let's say, I mean, you know, things change. We have a huge spike in COVID cases, or we want to curtail flights for whatever reason. So yes, it's uncertain, but I guess just like everything else in the world at this point in time, we're in uncertain times, and more so because the Ministry of Civil Aviation and India hasn't really sort of put in a bailout package in place for our airlines, because let's be honest, they don't have the resources to be able to give any kind of relief to the airline industry. So indirectly, this is relief in some sort of way, where we will restrict access. I know this is not ideal to foreign airlines, and we will give you an opportunity. I mean, the outcome of these arrangements is Vistara has I mean, they're now flying to London Heathrow 4 times a week, and they launched these flights in the middle of the pandemic. SpiceJet today, for that matter, has announced flights to London Heathrow from Delhi and Mumbai, and they're a low-cost airline. They don't have wide-bodied aircraft, but because of this opportunity that has been created for Indian airlines, because of the air bubble arrangement, they now have leased an A330neo from Highfly, and the aircraft is going to be operating to London from Delhi and Mumbai twice a week. So, I mean, there are two sides to a coin, and I sort of agree with Nitin, but I just wanted to add my 2 bits there.
That is fascinating. Gentlemen, I love these conversations. I look forward to chatting with you soon.
We do too.
Very much.